it's a montage that was taken over multiple days. And so just like taking a filmed montage of a watering hole in Africa, we're getting all of the different life forms that are moving into position and then migrating away when the pictures were being taken. So it's kind of a composite image, but it's full of life forms. So clearly that paper was in the possession of the CIA by no later than 1968, because my father read a kind of a debased version of it for humor, for its comedic impact, and then suddenly in 1969 he's showing me perhaps the most important image in that paper, which is the detail of a humanoid being on Silkowski Ridge across from the home plate plateau. So another year or so passes. These are somewhat just benchmark kind of dates. I mean, I'm talking about going back and trying to establish a timeline based on a set of esoteric experiences in childhood now, 40 years hence. The third event occurred sometime around 1970. We were at the house in Morris Plains, and my dad said, "Andy, come with me. We're going over to Curtis Wright." And when we got inside his Volkswagen, I said, "Are we going to New Mexico again?" Meaning, are we going to be jumping through the teleporter there at Building 68 at Curtis Wright and popping out several seconds later in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and then maybe doing things there for a day, week, or month, and then teleporting back to Curtis Wright with an adjustment in time, suggesting that we only been gone for about an hour. So my dad said, "No, I'm just taking you over to Curtis Wright. We're going to stay in New Jersey." And I said, "What's over there?" And he said, "There are some Martians over there that have been on a technical liaison mission with our personnel, and they want to meet you." I think what must have happened is that these Martian aviators had been interacting with my father's team. My father had ties to Curtis Wright that went back to 1952, a couple months after the famous July 1952 overflight of Washington, D.C. By 9 UFOs clocked at 7,000 miles per hour at Langley Air Force Base. My father received a visit at Okanite Company in Paramus, New Jersey, where he was working, shortly after graduating with a BS in electrical engineering from Lehigh University in 1951. So my dad's on his first job, and he gets a visit from the feds. There's a colonel standing near his desk giving him orders to report at Curtis Wright on Monday. This is in October of 52. What had happened was he had been placed on the ramjet engine project, which was a high-speed jet aircraft that would enable the U.S. Air Force to follow and chase flying saucers out of our atmosphere and our near-Earth environment. It was hoped that the ramjet would actually not only travel in the atmosphere, but beyond it. And my dad was tasked with finding a metal alloy that they could make the engine and the hull of the ramjet with, so that it wouldn't melt as a result of friction from molecules of air, and also through contact with space dust when the ramjet went out of our atmosphere. So he was actually on a compartmentalized project. They had different colored name badges. People with different colored badges couldn't even eat lunch together. The whole assembly of the ramjet was a compartmentalized project. So my dad had roots at professional ties to the Curtis Wright facility going back to October of 1952. Here it is. It's 1970, 18 years later, but he's still getting on and off the Curtis Wright base with an assumed identity and major credentials issued by the U.S. Army. He was an Army major in the so-called Second Reserve. Okay. So he takes me over to Curtis Wright, and we don't go to Building 68 where the teleporter was. He takes me to this big hangar, and we walk to the left across sort of this loading dock-like platform. And on that level of this big hangar, there was a meeting room. On the right side, where the stage-like area that we walked out onto ended, at the end of that loading dock, there was a silver-colored, teardrop-shaped Martian craft, highly aerodynamically designed, with the larger side of the teardrop being the leading edge of the craft, and then tapering to a narrow tail section that was about the size of a compact car. I mean, it was about the size of of a Toyota or Nissan car from the mid-'70s. And it was just hovering at the end of that stage, put, 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 put. But we didn't go over and look at it. We went over to the left. We went into a small little conference room, kind of like the ones that they have at NASA Mission Control, where the shuttle astronauts are debriefed, or, they're not debriefed, but they have their last cup of coffee before getting on the shuttle. And there were a couple of aerospace engineers like my dad with their credentials hanging from clips, from their breast pockets, and 3 Martian astronauts who were speaking perfect English with a wide vocabulary, but in a highly high-pitched voices. And they looked over at me when I entered the room, and one of them said something like, "Oh, he's a fine-looking lad," or something like that. And then they completed their technical meeting, and they walked out of the room and past my dad. There were 2 rather large guys and a smaller one who looked more professorial, and they walked along the edge of the stage and down a set of stairs towards their craft, carrying these units. I don't know whether they were respiration units, but carrying these box-like briefcases that were either air purifiers or respiration devices or something attached to their suits. Maybe they were pressurizing the suits. I don't know. But the last one of the 3 turned to my dad and in unaccented American English said, "Ray, it was a privilege. No, it was a pleasure visiting your beautiful planet again, and a pleasure having the opportunity to meet you again. I hope we can meet again next time we come to Earth." And my dad exchanged rather diplomatic pleasantries with this Martian. People have asked me, what did they look like? Well, this group of Martians that is spacefaring look very much like modern humans. They're a little bit more rugged looking, and they're bald. But as I've often said during my talks, if they were wearing Armani suits and walking down Fifth Avenue in New York City, you would think that they were just bald men, not Martians. I mean, they look that much like us. But as they passed me, and I looked towards them walking away, I could see that in these tight-fitting silver jumpsuits, their musculature was allocated a little differently than modern humans, perhaps as a result of a more intense amount of natural selection going on Mars, where it's basically more difficult to survive. So these were very fit individuals. And the last one turned and exchanged pleasantries with my dad, and he just sort of smiled and said, "Well, yes, I hope that happens. Have a good trip." They then walked into their craft from the bottom, and the craft departed from the loading dock-like stage and went putt across the expanse of this hangar-like building at Curtiss Wright. Curtiss Wright, of course, being where the strategic aircraft were designed and built during World War II. I mean, that was the primary laboratory for making high-performance aircraft for the Allied war effort during World War II. So this is 25 years later, 1970. The craft goes out onto the tarmac outside the hangar, and one of the engineers, who was one of my dad's colleagues, said, "Now watch this, Andrew. You're not going to believe it." The Martian craft did a big sweeping circle, and when they got to the straightaway again, just like sprinters in a track and field competition, they accelerated down that main drag there at Curtiss Wright so quickly that all I saw was a silver flash. It looked like they had been disintegrated to the left, and they just went zoof and took off at what must have been, I don't know, 8,000 miles per hour. I mean, it was just incredibly fast.
Andrew, we've got another break creeping up. I swear the time is moving faster. The planet must be turning quicker. We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. And if you tuned in for Donnie Gilson, we did reschedule him, and our thoughts and prayers out to him, too. We may get him on the line a little bit later in the broadcast for a brief update. But we'll be right back. ProjectPegasus.net, the website. We'll see you on the other side.
Archaeology, astronomy, alchemy, secrets of the Holy Bible, hidden codes of the Quran, demonology, Tesla technology, solar power, extraterrestrials in the ancient world. More than 500 documentaries, an experimental film lab of cutting-edge music and art, full-length movies, conference reports, and weekly TV shows. The Enigma Channel is the world's first truly global TV station. www.enigmatv.com. Intelligent television for planet Earth.
Hey, this is Chris and Cherie, hosts of Truth Frequency, here to tell you all about our favorite suppliers of entheogens and sacred plants, Bouncing Bear Botanicals. This is the only supplier that I trust for fresh ayahuasca vine directly from the Amazon basin. Just go to truthfrequencyradio.com and click on the banner right on our front page.
And don't forget, Chris, Bouncing Bear also offers only the freshest Amanita muscaria, San Pedro cactus, Salvia divinorum, Thai kratom, and much, much more. So order now through our website, truthfrequencyradio.com, by clicking on the banner. Your order will be shipped securely, and your information is always kept safe and confidential. And by ordering through truthfrequencyradio.com, not only will you get the best customer service on the planet, but you'll also be supporting the show.
So don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, tap into the Truth Frequency every Saturdays, 10 o'clock Central on Oracle Broadcasting, truthfrequencyradio.com.
This is the Oracle Broadcasting Radio Network. Visit us online at oraclebroadcasting.com.